It was 1922, the golden age of silent films, jazz clubs, and underground speakeasies was in full swing in Los Angeles. The city was growing fast, pulling in dreamers from across the country who all wanted a taste of the Hollywood magic. On the surface, it was a place where stars were born, fortunes were made, and anything seemed possible. But behind that glittering image, LA was hiding something darker. Beneath the glitz and glamour, corruption, organized crime, and cover-ups were part of everyday life. And on a cool morning in February of that year, the illusion was shattered when the body of a respected film director, William Desmond Taylor, was found dead in his apartment. He had been shot in the back, execution style, no signs of a struggle, no weapon, no witnesses. The press pounced on the story like bloodhounds, and the public was riveted. But as the LAPD tried and failed to crack the case, something else became clear. The old-school ways of solving crime weren't going to cut it anymore. Taylor's murder didn't just shake Hollywood, it exposed just how out of its depth the police force really was. And it forced LA to reckon with something it had been ignoring for years: the need for forensic science. William Desmond Taylor wasn't just another Hollywood player, he was a major name in the silent film world, with a career that spanned acting, directing, and producing. He worked with some of the biggest stars of the time, and his films were critical and commercial successes. But what made his story even more intriguing was that Taylor, real name William Cunningham Dean Tanner, had a mysterious past. Before Hollywood, he was a wealthy antique dealer in New York. Then, one day, he simply vanished, left his wife and daughter without a word. Years later, he reappeared in Los Angeles, now a rising film director under a new identity. No one ever really explained why he disappeared or what he did during those missing years, but it added a layer of secrecy that made his murder even more sensational. A man who had already lived two lives was now dead in one of the most bizarre killings in Hollywood history, and the list of people who might have had a reason to kill him just kept growing. The actual discovery of Taylor's body was the first in a long series of mistakes that would sabotage any hope of solving the case. His valet found him lying face down in his living room and called for help, but not the police. Instead, actors, studio execs, and publicists from Paramount rushed over before authorities could get there. And they didn't just stand around. They tampered with the scene, moved the body, cleaned up alcohol bottles to avoid scandal under Prohibition, and may have even stolen personal letters. These weren't just nosy onlookers, they were people with a vested interest in preserving Hollywood's image. By the time the LAPD arrived, the apartment was a forensic disaster. Evidence was gone, the crime scene was contaminated, investigators were left with little more than a corpse and a bunch of unreliable witnesses. And the LAPD wasn't equipped for a case this big. This was decades before forensic labs, no crime scene tape, no photographic evidence protocols. The entire investigation started with a fumble, and it never recovered. The studio system at the time was unbelievably powerful, and what happened next proved it. Hollywood went into full crisis mode. Studio heads were terrified of bad publicity. A major director murdered in cold blood. That wasn't just a tragedy, it was a PR nightmare. Executives and press agents quickly began working to control the narrative. They leaned on the police to keep things quiet. They scrubbed scandalous details from the press. Stars who knew Taylor were instructed on what to say or not say at all. Silent film star Mabel Normand, who had been with Taylor just hours before he died, was immediately under suspicion. She claimed she'd left before the murder and that he was fine when she walked out the door. Meanwhile, another actress, Mary Miles Minter, was discovered to have written him passionate love letters. Her overbearing mother, Charlotte Shelby, reportedly hated Taylor and had been seen with a rare pearl-handled pistol, the same kind used in the murder. But no one would talk. Hollywood had its secrets, and it wasn't about to let one murder take the whole empire down. With the LAPD paralyzed and the public demanding justice, something had to give. The Taylor case quickly became a symbol of a much bigger issue. Law enforcement in LA was operating in the dark ages. The city was growing, the crimes were getting more sophisticated, and the cops were still relying on outdated techniques, interrogations, gut instincts, and hunches. There were no real crime labs, no experts in ballistics or trace evidence. Coroners had minimal training. Witness statements were taken without any verification. In response to the public embarrassment, the city began to modernize. Slowly but surely, pressure from the media, angry citizens, and even some insiders forced change. Medical examiners were actually trained in forensic pathology. New standards were developed for securing crime scenes. Fingerprint classification became mandatory. LA began building what would become the early versions of forensic departments, and while it wouldn't fix the Taylor case, it meant that future crimes might not slip through the cracks. But even with all those advancements, William Desmond Taylor's murder was never officially solved. For decades, theories piled up like old film reels in a vault. Some said Mabel Norman's drug connections might have had Taylor killed because he tried to cut off her supply. Others believed Mary Miles Minter was obsessed with him, and her mother, terrified of scandal, pulled the trigger to protect her daughter's career. Then, there were the more conspiratorial takes, that Taylor knew something dark about the industry, something he wasn't supposed to know. Maybe he was blackmailing someone. Maybe he'd seen something he shouldn't have. Every time new evidence surfaced, it vanished just as quickly. Witnesses contradicted themselves, suspects lawyered up, and eventually the LAPD just gave up. The trail went cold, but the echoes of that failure would ripple out for decades. LA's criminal justice system had been embarrassed in front of the entire nation, and it knew it. Fast forward to today, and things couldn't be more different. If a Hollywood director was found dead now, there'd be forensic teams swarming the scene within minutes. DNA swabs, digital records, surveillance footage, phone pings, 3D scene reconstructions. It's a whole different ballgame. But none of that happened overnight. It took cases like Taylor's, big, messy, embarrassing failures, to force cities to evolve. His death might have faded from headlines, but the legacy of the investigation remains. It taught LA that crimes committed in the shadow of the Hollywood sign couldn't be treated like small-town murders. When fame, money, and power are involved, you need real tools, real science, and real accountability. So, next time you hear about a high-tech forensic breakthrough, remember this. It started with a botched crime scene in 1922, a city that wasn't ready, and a man whose murder still haunts Hollywood. William Desmond Taylor's case may be unsolved, but it changed the game forever.